year was 2012, and SkyTrain ridership continued to skyrocket, with new bus routes connecting the SkyTrain across the region. The legendary Mark 1s were starting to show their age. A refurbishment was already planned for 2014, but it would only buy them about a decade at the most. A new Millennium Line extension was also under construction. This came with a new SkyTrain operations center with a large number of cars relocated to this section. Eventually, it was made clear that the original Mark 2s were going to be selected for the job, as residents from downtown Vancouver and Metrotown can finally be relieved from their Banshee ritual. The Mark II's retirement from Expo Line service would leave a substantial hole in the fleet that needed to be filled. Knowing this, TransLink made an order for new cars which would make several firsts for the network. All the SkyTrain cars to this point, the Mark 1s and 2s, come in a set of married pairs with or without an articulated joint connecting them. This new SkyTrain car would completely abandon that concept and instead come as a 4-car train set with 2 A and B units. A total of 7 train sets were ordered for delivery in 2015 and were quickly dubbed the Mark III. The first Mark IIIs arrived and began testing along the Expo Line tracks. Compared to the other cars, the Mark IIIs had an interesting appearance to say the least, but the looks eventually grew with time. The train sets would start service on the Expo and Millennium lines in March 2016. That was for 8 months. Their stint on the Millennium line would come to an end upon the opening of the Evergreen extension on December 2nd, when all first-gen Mark IIs were transferred to the service full-time. From that date onwards, the Mark IIIs exclusively ran on the Expo line in ideal conditions. In snowy conditions, they are allocated to the Millennium line to assist the Mark IIs in reduced manual operations. In Expo line service, the Mark IIIs performed flawlessly in heavy rush hour traffic, at least at the time, as their increased length massively improved passenger comfort. The cars were equipped with the same powertrain as the Mark II.5s and sound nearly identical. One negative difference between the two, however, is the removal of the captain's seat at the front of the train. To lessen injuries in serious accidents, the passenger compartment was moved back into A units, creating a large crumple zone in the nose. This improved safety inside the cars, but it cost the best seat on every other SkyTrain car. The spot where the captain's seat was replaced by a set of seats instead. Other than that noticeable downgrade, the Mark IIIs were positively received from passengers for their improved features. TransLink was also impressed with the train's performance, and proceeded to order a second batch of 15 Mark III train sets in order to increase capacity further. They were delivered between 2019 and 2020, with the last Mark IIIs arriving to no fanfare in September because of the beer virus. These cars in particular were notable. They unofficially became the first cars to replace the Mark Is, as the same month as the final set arrived, 1991 pair 133 and 134 were quietly withdrawn and scrapped. These cars were also one of the last orders made by Bombardier, as they would quietly disband their large transportation empire. The Innova program, the SkyTrain cars, would be acquired by Alstom in 2021. By 2022, ridership started to rise again, but this good news exposed a weakness in the Mark III's armor, and it wasn't completely foreign to the SkyTrain system. arrangement, much like the original Mark IIs, made the trains a nightmare to stand on in heavy rush hour traffic. And oh boy, they get consistently slammed. Not even their train set nature helped them in the increasingly busy workload. The venerable Mark Is were also starting to fall apart, with a 1995 and a pair of 1985 sets retired, and parts were getting increasingly hard to come by. It's clear that a new train was desperately needed to not only assist the Mark IIIs, but allow the Mark Is to ride out into the sunset. It's July 2025, and the first of the Mark III's help shows up. The Mark V made its official debut on July 10th, with an updated seat configuration, new LED screens and lights, an extra car, and a long-awaited return of the captain's seat. The trains so far got universal praise from passengers and were a substantial improvement across the board, all except for the numbering system. The Mark II.5s already damaged it, but now the Mark Vs have completely destroyed it. There is already a full video on the Mark V's first day on the channel, and there will probably be updates on this train as more start service in the next year or so, but over 100 cars are currently on order, finally allowing the veteran Mark I sets to ride into the sunset after nearly 45 years of service in 2028. The long-term future of the Mark IIIs is also an interesting note. And this is where the speculation begins. They may not be long for the Expo line. The Mark III's future, at least for some, could be on the Millennium line. The original Mark II cars are currently 25 years old, and some are in absolutely horrible condition. The first of these cars are slated for retirement in 2029 and continue on until the early 2030s. And if any speculation on the Mark V Joyride turns out to be true, 201 and 202 have completely disappeared from the face of the earth. If that's not a sign that the Screaming Banshees are cooked, I don't know what else is at this point. But what does any of this have to do with the Mark IIIs? The cars could be a spiritual successor on the Millennium line, as they and the OG Mark IIs share a very similar configuration but are obviously longer. The Millie doesn't see as much demand as the Expo line and seems to be the right environment for the trains to thrive. If ridership inevitably skyrockets on the line of the Broadway subway, then both the 3s and 5s will run on both lines, along with the soon-to-be retired Mark II.5s, just as they originally did until 2016. Regardless on where they operate, the Mark IIIs launched a new era for the SkyTrain. Where the previous models made riding the small trains feel just that, the next gens are more spacious and allow for the ability for riders to spread out and disperse in heavy crowds. They have and will continue to have a massive impact on the SkyTrain network for decades to come. After all, the Mark III walked, so the Mark V and future models could run.